Know yourself, follow your passion, make your work and passion the same thing while considering the money part, because money will get you freedom and choice and be able to make that. But if you know yourself, feel the pull and pursue that passion. Understand on your journey, your hero's journey, that you will have mistakes and you will have weaknesses. And to understand those, not fight those. Because by understanding mistakes, you will learn not to make mistakes again. I have a principle which is pain plus reflection equals progress. So that reflection is important, to know yourself, know your pulls, know your weaknesses. And when you also know your weaknesses and the strengths of other people, there are people who have strengths where you're weak and you have strengths where they're weak. And to be able to work well together is the most effective way of achieving success.
Need motivation?
Watch the top 10 with hashtag BelieveNation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more. And you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Ray Dalio, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, learn from failures.
Then you start your own company, right?
Yeah.
And it went incredibly well at the beginning.
1975. It was me, a guy I played rugby with, in my 2-bedroom apartment.
Okay, and everything went well until it didn't go well.
That's right.
And did you then have to go borrow money from your father?
Yeah, yes. So what happened was, it was a very small company, just, a handful of people. And I loved to trade the markets, and we did it for institutions. And then in 1979, 80, 81, I calculated that that the American banks had lent more money to foreign countries than the countries were going to get paid back. And I had this controversial view that the world, is going to be a big debt crisis. And Mexico defaulted in 1982. So very interesting, 1982. And when they defaulted, I got a lot of attention, and I thought we were going to have a terrible economic set of circumstances. And I could not have been more wrong. It was exactly the opposite. In August, when they defaulted and other countries started to default, it was the exact bottom in the stock market. And so I had to let off everybody, and I was down to me, and I said to myself, well, am I going to have to put on a tie and go take the train in and go to Wall Street and so on? I couldn't bring myself to do that. And I was so broke that I had to borrow $4,000 from my dad to pay the bills. And this was the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, painful, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it gave me the humility I needed to balance with my audacity. And then I needed to understand, how can I have the upside without having the downside? And then I understood the portfolio construction and risk management and so on and so forth. So that was my bottom, and that punch in the face, that experience was one of the best things that happened.
Did you pay your father back at some point?
The $4,000 plus.
He didn't want equity in Bridgewater? He didn't ask for that?
No, I think he was smarter than that.
Rule number 3, build equanimity.
I think the key is to think of reality as you're given. Reality is reality. And think of it as working like a machine. There are cause-effect relationships that make the realities around you. Okay, now, if you go above yourself and you look at that, how does that machine work? And then, how do I interact with that machine to get what I want? And you do that with an equanimity. Meditation also helped me a lot.
Yes.
I learned to meditate many years ago. If you have equanimity and you look at it above and you look at it with curiosity and you say, oh, I must not be interacting well with my reality, and how do I change it and how does it work? It's a very powerful way of approaching life.
Rule number 4, learn how to take notes.
If I'm making a decision that after I make the decision usually, or right at the time, if I pause and reflect and I write my principle down. In other words, principle is sort of a recipe. What would I use how would I make that decision? And what are the criteria around it? I find that I make it much more clear. It becomes clearer, and it applies to the next thing that comes along. It'll be that way because everything happens over and over and over again. And I think people make the mistake of looking at just the one like it's the first one. They have, they have the first problem of this sort, or the first child, or whatever it is. And this has been happening plenty of times. And so if you have the principles, I found that helped me think more clearly about it. And it helped me communicate better, like why. And so over the last 30 years or so, that's what I've done. I did it originally to communicate very well with the people I work with. I set up my company, and it was very important to have good communication. And then we could debate the principles. And so that's the process. I urge people to do that. There are many excellent decision makers, and I just wish that they wrote down their principles when this sets. So, for example, we'll be talking about Henry Kissinger, and his new book is going to come out with a book on leadership. And don't just describe the leaders, describe then what about them were the essential elements to make a good leader under what circumstances. Mm-hmm. And so if we think about that, then you begin to think in a principled way. And then when you start to think in a principled way, life becomes, it's so much easier to make decisions, and it's so much less confusing, because it's like coming up on a species and you say, okay, well, what species is it? Not just it's a thing. No, what species is it? And how do I deal with that species effectively? Mm-hmm. And so that's what that is. And so I encourage people to write it down. I wish anybody who's successful wrote down their principles or their recipes for making those types of decisions.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, practice meditation.
In 1968, the Beatles went to India and they meditated. And then I heard about it. And then in 1969 in New York, you can bring some flowers and you could do that, and you could learn how to meditate. And wow, I recommend. It's the best gift I could give.
You do it every day or every?
Almost yeah. I try to do it every day. I try to do it about twice a day. And if I could take a second to describe it, what it is it frees your mind of thought, and it takes you from a conscious state into your subconscious. And your subconscious is where creativity comes from, and equanimity and all of that. Like if you're calm and great ideas come to you. And when you have that equanimity, then as you're approaching everything, things are just the way they are, and you have to deal with them. And it's a little like being, in the ninja movies, it's a little bit like being the ninja, and everything seems slower and you can handle it better. Right. And you align your subconscious, which is where the emotions and also inspirations come from, with your conscious mind. And when they're aligned and you have that equanimity, it's a great thing.
Rule number 6, know your nature.
I think, first of all, one has to know their nature. You might have to discover it. But your nature means, do you have a sense of adventure? Do you seek security? Are you an extrovert, an introvert? Those types of things. So personal discovery is important. I think that who you're with and where you are is more important than what you do. Because in the early phase of that second phase, it's total discovery. So it's experimentation. you went to India for 3 years, right?
Yes.
But if you have that sense of adventure, to let go, you can discover. That's your opportunity. But discover yourself as well as to discover what the choices are like. And then as you move later into that, you'll feel the pulls. And to feel never trapped. We were talking just before we began that so many people say, I can't be that way because my job won't allow it, which is a silly concept because you have the freedom of those choices, even when you have constraining situations. So I think that's the life arc. Enjoy this wide open choice. You can be anywhere in the world. You can do almost anything. Let go, experiment, and then move on.
Rule number 7, share knowledge to others.
To give the knowledge, teach a man how to fish is better than to give him a fish. I mean, I think you can give them both. You can give education and you can, but ability, the capacity to be productive, because, if I can give you the capacity to go out in the world, it's like go into a jungle. I give you a knife and can you live in the jungle? Okay. If I give you that capacity, that's the best thing I can give you. That's why I wrote the book and, pass it along. I wrote those principles over years and I wrote them down, and that's what I want to pass along. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
But if you've got money, you can help people a lot in a lot of different ways, which is thrilling.
What would you say then are the 3 greatest skills that people that aren't financially abundant or that are struggling financially should learn to master in order to be in a better position financially? 3 skills, what would you say they should learn?
Well, as I said before, I remember watching the movie, I was young, David Copperfield with W.C. Fields, and he speaks to David Copperfield, and he said something like, and I'll put it in dollar terms. You earn $100 and you spend $105. That's misery. If you earn $100 and you spend $95, you'll have a good life. I mean, it wasn't exactly like that, but it was. But basically, I know so many people who don't earn much, but are there. Because if you start to think about what it is that it costs you to live in terms of, let's say, the basics, give me a bed to sleep in, give me the food, let me be educated, and so on and so forth. I think most people can get themselves in a position where they're net positive. Mm-hmm. So if you can be net positive and you could do that, that's number one, as I carry that. So that's number one. Then I guess it was the list that we went to. The second is, what do you do next in terms of what do you need? What do you invest in? Mm-hmm. And then, going beyond it. And then avoid the following mistake, the most common mistake of investing, thinking that the investment that did good is a good investment. People rather more expensive. The things that quite often, those markets that did really, really well became more expensive, and everybody, smart money, is all the time comparing them and competing. So what happens is the naive money buys the thing that was hot or is hot. The thing that has been terrible, which might be the thing that's beaten down. So I would say also an important element. Okay, so here's another one that's really important. Diversify.
So don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right, because what I learned about this is that, first of all investments compete. And it's not easy to tell whether one investment is better than the other, because if people could do that, life would be easy and everybody'd make a ton of money. And this is a competitive game that's very difficult to compete in. So it's very difficult to say which one's better or worse. You could take experts and you could and do all sorts of tests, and you'll find out that they can pick that, and you can't tell whether the worst ones are going to be better. So because of that, you understand that even picking the best ones is difficult, and particularly if you're naive. Like, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars each year on research to try to give us an edge.
Wow.
Okay. Now you've got to compete with us. So competing in the markets is more difficult than competing in the Olympics. You wouldn't go think I'm going to compete in the Olympics, but there are more people who try harder in order to do that. So it's a zero-sum game. So, but diversification, that they're different, will reduce your risk without reducing your return.
Yeah.
So if you know how to diversify well, so that's critical. So I would say, again, get your savings right. And the reasons I would say, have great humility about what you don't know. Don't buy the thing that was hot. Don't just because you think it's hot. And then know how to diversify well. Those would be the most important things I could convey.
Rule number 8, use the looping process.
Know your goals. Know what you're going after. You could have almost anything you want, but you can't have everything you want. And so you have to prioritize, and you move in that direction. On the way to your goals, you're going to encounter your problems and your obstacles. So step 2 is understanding your problems and your obstacles, identify them. Step 3 is to diagnose them to get at the root cause of the problem. And that could be many root causes, but it could also be your weaknesses or weaknesses of others, but you have to be objective about them. Once you diagnose them, then you go to step 4, which is to design a way to get around them. And then after you have that design, you implement that design. So you have to follow through and do it. And you do that, and that will then produce its new results, which should be better results. I call this kind of the looping process. It's the evolutionary looping process. And you just keep doing that, and you learn over a period of time, and you move in the direction that you want.
Rule number 9, understand patterns.
There were 3 things that happened in my lifetime that are happening now that didn't happen in my lifetime before and that I needed to study. And that was an enormous amount of creation of debt and the monetization of that in a financial piece. The second is the internal conflict, populism of the right and the left, and with wealth gaps and so on, that I like to measure things, that you'd have to go back to 1900 to see those degrees of conflict, which I think are a threat to our system and a democracy and could produce a civil war type of situation. Right. And third, the rise of a great power to challenge an existing great power in the existing world order. Now, those 3 things in their degrees individually, but also collectively, last time they happened was 1930 to 45 period. And so what I needed to do was to understand those patterns and those things, and I took it into it. And so what I'm hoping to show is simply the mechanics of it in a lot of, and then explain why it appears that we are at an important juncture. Now, what we do at that juncture, so yes, it's measured, and the United States is in relative to decline by measures, which are measured, and China has been rising, and that's an issue, but that doesn't create necessarily a destiny. It creates a situation which I hope we can
explore. We'll go through that.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is delay gratification.
I want to distinguish, there's big differences in opportunities.
Yes.
So let's say, supposing you have 2 people of comparable opportunities.
Yes.
And then they were going to do that. Yep. Okay. The marshmallow test, as you know, apparently, is you take a kid and you say, okay, you can have 1 marshmallow now, or you could have 2 marshmallows in 15 minutes or something.
If you don't eat the first one, yeah.
If you don't eat the first one, right?
Yep.
Okay. Once you start to realize that deferred gratification is going to make you better and so on, and you start to count and you say like something like, how many days, weeks, months, or years can I live if I don't have money come in? And you start to focus in on that. That's the first step. Okay. Like the marshmallow test.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I want to save. You got to start there. Then if you do that, you're necessarily going to go save in what? Mm. And then you'll start to get exposure to how these things are different. Okay, then you start to care. Mm-hmm. Well, I can have one of these and one of those, and you start to experience, and then you start to learn. And basically, that's what makes the difference. My son in 2014 gave me a book by Joseph Campbell called Hero of a Thousand Faces. And basically he described that these things happen, everybody crashes, and then you're faced with that crash. And you either have an epiphany or you don't. You either walk off the field and say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, and you give up on that, going after your audacious goals, or you gain really humility. You how do you feel that you're going to be wrong? And so I think then that whole notion is, to come back with the finding the smartest people I could find who disagree with me. Also, I'm in the investment management business that you have to bet against the consensus. Otherwise, you can't make money because it's in the price. And you have to bet against the consensus and be right. Or as an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. I had to bet against the consensus and be right. And so to gain that humility was the thing. So you either get off the field or you learn. The average person who's listening, too many people, think that they can go into this very difficult zero-sum game of betting against the consensus and be right. You know what I mean? In other words, investor says, I'm going to go in the markets, I'm going to make money.
Betting against the consensus and be right.
Right. Because the consensus is built into the price.
Okay.
Okay? That's what's the, so it's, think of it as like going to a horse race and there's handicaps. Okay? You're not going to pick the best horse and you're not going to pick the best company. A terrible company can be a better investment than a terrific company. A terrible company could be a better investment, just like the terrible horse can be a better investment, because the odds that are changing, like you go into that and that becomes the long shot. But because the long shot is going to pay off 25 to 1, right? If he comes in, that you could just as likely bet on the long shot as the leader, and it's going to be equally likely that you're going to make money, right? Otherwise the market would be doing the opposite. Well, the market is like that, right? In other words, if everybody believes that something's going to be terrific, okay, then everybody's betting on it, and its price is high. So it's not what's best necessarily. It's what's best relative to what's in the price, what's discounted. This is the biggest message that I think that I would get across, that I'm trying to convey in principles and so on, is that so many people have opinions in their heads that might be wrong, and they're too attached to them. And if you know how to operate with a certain amount of uncertainty and stress test your opinions in a different way, you get away from your ego, get away from all that. You can learn a lot about raising your probabilities of being right. So what it made me want to do is find the smartest people I could find who disagreed with me. And then I could have conversations with them. You have to know what you're going after. You can't have everything in the world, but you could have almost anything you want, but you can't have everything you want. If you go after your goals and they're clear, you have to know your goals.
The two big things is, how do you get your alignment of your lower level you with your upper level you? How do you get past your ego and your blind spot? And we know what the ego barrier is, like I gotta be right, or whatever it is, or I'm not good at this. The blind spot barrier is the realization that people actually see things different. They see different things. Like somebody will see the big picture, somebody will see the detail. They'll focus on different things, almost like a color spectrum type of thing. And if you realize that you will see a part of that spectrum and other people will see the other part of the spectrum, and so that you really need to, when you go above yourself, you really need to orchestrate all those ways of seeing, because you are not just one of those people that's got to do it yourself. Your way of being the success is to go above it and be the orchestrator and know what you're good at and what you're not good at. So it's almost like if you want your life to be successful, you will not let yourself do certain things because you're just no good at them. Once you get that picture down, then you can find the paths wherever the paths are. You're open-minded because now you've given up your ego barrier and your blind spot barrier. I should explain believability-weighted decision-making to you if you're interested. Okay, so ordinarily, there are two ways of making decisions, pretty much. There's the boss has control, and so
Autocratic, right?
Autocratic, I'll call that autocratic. Takes in everything and then he makes a decision. Or there's democratic, pretty much, one man, one vote. But really, the best decision-making is believability-weighted decision-making. And if you think about it first conceptually, you would say, if you're going to make a decision of what you have a medical condition, and how are you going to get that? You're going to think, who are the best doctors?
Consult the experts, right?
Consult the experts, but this one knows more and that one knows less, and how do you do it? And then you have this triangulation, and then you make that. That's kind of the idea of believability decision-making. We have ways of assigning believability that we all agree are fair, that we each assess each other, and we get certain amount of believability points. So now imagine that you had your believability on a subject matter. Maybe it's investing, maybe it's accounting, whatever the subject is, that you have a certain amount of believability weighted points and you're together. Well, those believability weighted points, when you say, okay, what should I make as a decision? Now I'm responsible for something, but I ask everybody else, and I take a believability weighted vote. I can have a believability weighted vote. When I have that believability weighted vote, I really do believe that it's going to be a better decision than I would individually make. That's believability weighted decision making. Meditation is the biggest gift that I can give anyone. And I would say more than anything, it is whatever reason for success I've had. Because it allows one, back to the two U's, I'll clarify. What I mean is that in your mind, we think, what do you want? And the reality is, when you look at the neuroscience and psychology, that there are different parts of your brain that want different things. And so in the simplest sense, there is the logical part of your brain that you're conscious of, it's called the conscious, and you think you're being logical and you want to make those decisions. And then there's the subliminal, below the limbic system, part of the brain, which is the emotional, and it's not as conscious to you, but it has more of an influence on you than really the logical one. And so they're not aligned. And so when you're experiencing that pain, or let's say the ego, right, there were two main things. You got an ego barrier and a blind spot barrier. If you can get past your ego barrier and you get past your blind spot barrier, you can accomplish anything, because you'll also know that you don't have to do everything, you don't have to figure it out yourself. You can take in from other people the different ways to approach things in the best possible way. And so the realization that we all are really struggling with ourselves, and to think which is in control. Meditation helps to deal with the alignment of those two things.
You now use a lot of computer-related algorithms to help you navigate the market?
Yes, algorithms are what we call them today. Equations is what we used to call them. And so you would write that down, and what I learned is, by being clear, then I could tell how that decision would have worked in the past, in all different environments. So it gave me a lot of perspective on making that decision. I could test it through the Great Depression and so on. And then I could find that if I use that same algorithm, I could take data from and have the computer make decisions in parallel with me. And so, this is what I recommend for everybody. I recommend they write down their principles and then realize that almost any of those principles can then be converted into algorithms. And so the computer was making decisions in parallel with me making decisions. That type of partnership between me and the computer, and also expressing the algorithms, was invaluable, not only in the quality of the decision making, but also the quality of the relationships that I had with the people I worked with. Knowing how to diversify well is more important than almost anything. People don't understand this.
Is that an evergreen principle, you think?
Yes, that's an evergreen principle.
Interesting.
And the reason I'm saying that, the way it is, it's almost like a casino making its money.
Okay.
Okay. The way that you do it is you get an edge. So now when you have to make a bet, I've got to bet against the whole world. The world has view on something is reflected in the price. So when I think something is attractive or unattractive, that means I have to bet against the whole world on whether that's right or not. That's difficult. I get it right, more often than I get it wrong, but I'm going to get it wrong sometimes. And so when you can take a lot of different bets, what you can do is, like the casino, you'll get your average that your bet would be, but you'll reduce your risk of one of those tables not being the table that's paying off. And so that margin, so I can reduce my risk without reducing my return by knowing how to diversify. So 1979, 80, 81, I calculated that American banks had lent a lot more money to emerging countries than those countries were going to get paid back. And I anticipated that there would be a debt crisis, and with that, an economic crisis. So that was my thinking. In August 1982, Mexico defaulted on its debt, and a number of countries followed. And so because I said that, I got a lot of attention about that. And I thought that was going to be producing a bear market in stocks. And I could not have been more wrong. August 1982 was the exact bottom of the stock market. And I was wrong. And as a result of that, let's take my 8 employees, I had to let them go. I lost money for myself. I lost money and I had to borrow $4,000 from my dad. It was one of the most painful experiences, but it was one of the best experiences that ever happened to me in my life, because it changed my perspective about decision making. It gave me the humility that I needed and fear of being wrong in my decisions, while I was able to maintain my aggressiveness. So it changed my whole approach to decision making.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you are different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video, because you are awesome. For 10 more amazing rules from Warren Buffett, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
If you had your choice between buying and holding a 30-year bond for 30 years or holding a basket of American stocks, there's just no question you're going to do better holding stocks. So it's